The bullet took the man in the eye. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, dead before he knew what hit him. Garrett Kane had killed 3 men in under 10 seconds to save them. But the real battle was just beginning, because the woman he rescued was not running from outlaws. She was running from something far more dangerous. Her own mother, and Victoria Hartford, would burn the world to get what she wanted. This is the story of how a mail-order bride, a broken rancher, and a 5-year-old child who witnessed murder became a family, and how they fought hell itself to stay together. Wyoming Territory, August 1883. The scream tore across the plains like a wound in the fabric of the world itself. The scream tore across the Wyoming plains like a wound in the fabric of the world itself. It was not the cry of an animal caught in a trap, not the shriek of a hawk diving for prey. This was human terror given voice, raw and desperate, cutting through the August heat like a knife through silk. Garrett Kane reined his buckskin mare to a hard stop, leather creaking under his weight as he rose in the stirrups. Sweat traced lines through the dust on his face. The temperature had to be pushing 112 degrees, the kind of heat that could kill a man if he was not careful. The kind of heat that made the horizon shimmer like water, promising relief that would never come. Garrett Kane had always been careful. 39 years on this earth had taught him that survival meant knowing when to move and when to stay still. It meant keeping your head down, your mouth shut, and your heart locked up tight where nothing could touch it. But that scream, Lord Almighty, that scream. He urged his mare forward, one hand dropping to the Winchester rifle strapped to his saddle. Could be anything out here. Outlaws. Comanche, though they had been pushed farther south in recent years. A wagon accident, a woman giving birth alone on the trail. He had seen all of it in his years ranging this territory, and none of it ever got easier to witness. When he crested the rise, what he saw stopped his heart cold. A stagecoach lay on its side in a shallow ravine, like a dying animal, one wheel shattered into splinters, the axle bent at an impossible angle. Supplies scattered across the hard-packed ground as if someone had torn through them in a fury. A trunk with its lid ripped open, clothing trampled into the dirt. A water barrel on its side, dark stains spreading beneath it where precious liquid had bled into the thirsty earth. The driver lay 20 feet from the coach, face down in the dust. Even from this distance, Garrett could see the unnatural stillness, the way the flies had already begun to gather. But it was the two figures that made him dig his heels into his mare and ride hard down the slope. A woman stood in the merciless sun, her traveling dress, the kind you saw in Boston or Philadelphia, completely wrong for Wyoming Territory. The fine fabric was torn and stained with rusty brown streaks that Garrett recognized immediately. Blood. Dried blood. Her left shoulder was wrapped in strips of cloth that had soaked through the makeshift bandage, failing in its purpose. Beside her, a child, could not have been more than 5 years old. Blonde hair hung in tangled knots around a face smudged with dirt and dried tears. Her calico dress, once maybe light blue, was now brown with dust and marked with those same rusty streaks. The little one held a broken spoke from the wagon wheel, brandishing it like a weapon despite arms that trembled with the effort. She was trying to shade her mother from the sun with her small body, trying to keep death at bay with nothing but stubborn will and a piece of wood. Garrett dismounted before his mare fully stopped, boots hitting the ground with purpose. The child's head snapped toward him, and he saw terror flash across her small face. But she did not run. Instead, she widened her stance and raised that branch higher, her thin arms shaking. The woman raised something too, a derringer. Small caliber, the kind of pistol a lady might hide in her reticule. The kind that would not stop a charging man, but might make him think twice. Her hand trembled so violently, the barrel described small circles in the air, but her eyes were hard. Stay back. The woman's voice cracked barely above a whisper, but the Boston accent was unmistakable. Do not touch her. Garrett raised his hands slowly, palms out, showing he meant no harm. Easy now. I'm not here to hurt anyone. That is what they said. The child's blue eyes were red-rimmed but fierce as any cornered animal. The men who came, they said they just wanted water. Garrett's jaw tightened. He had seen enough in his years to know exactly what that meant. Men who said they wanted water but took everything else. How long ago, he asked, keeping his voice gentle. 2 days, maybe 3. The woman swayed slightly, and Garrett realized she was fighting to stay upright. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin was red from sun exposure. I cannot remember. It is so hot. Garrett took in the scene with a soldier's eye. Two more bodies lay perhaps 200 yards distant. One had been shot. The other looked like his skull had been caved in with a rock. A woman in a Boston traveling dress had killed two outlaws and survived 2 days in the Wyoming heat with a child to protect. "Where is your father?" Garrett asked the child. The branch dipped. Dead. They shot him when he tried to stop them. The words came out flat, empty, delivered with the kind of shock Garrett had heard from soldiers who had seen too much too fast. No child should ever sound like that. No child should know that kind of loss. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Rose." She licked her cracked lips. "Rose, right. This is my Mama Clara." Garrett felt something shift in his chest, something he had thought sealed shut forever. The names were wrong, but it did not matter. Names could be lies. The terror in their eyes was truth. "I am Garrett Kane. I have got a ranch about 4 miles west of here." He took a careful step forward, then another when the woman did not raise the derringer higher. "Your mama needs help. Real help. The kind I can give her if you let me." The child studied him with an intensity that seemed far too old for her age. Garrett could see her weighing his words, searching his face for lies. She had learned to look for lies, 5 years old, and already she knew that men could not be trusted. The derringer lowered an inch, then another. "She will not wake up." The child whispered. "I tried. I keep trying." Garrett closed the distance between them and knelt beside the woman. The heat radiating from her skin told him what he needed to know before he even checked her pulse. Weak and rapid beneath his fingers, fluttering like a trapped bird. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. Her eyes rolled back, showing white. Fever, infection, dehydration. Out here in Wyoming territory, any one of those could kill. All three together was a death sentence. "How long has she been like this?" Garrett asked. "Since yesterday morning." The child's voice broke. She was talking before that. "Told me to stay with her. Told me not to leave her." Fresh tears cut tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. "I did not leave her. I stayed. You did good." Garrett meant every word. "You kept her shaded. That might have saved her life." But even as he said it, he was not sure it was true. The woman's condition was critical. Without immediate treatment, she would be dead by nightfall, maybe sooner. "We need to move her," Garrett said. "Get her somewhere cool, somewhere I can treat her proper." "Where my ranch? It is not fancy, but it has walls and a roof and a well with cold water." The child looked at her mother, then back at Garrett. He could see the war playing out behind her eyes. Trust this stranger or stay here and watch her mother die. She nodded once. Decision made. Garrett managed to get the woman across his saddle, securing her as best he could with rope. She was slight, but dead weight always felt heavier than it looked. Her head lolled, and he caught the faint scent of infection beneath the dried blood. The child stood watching that broken branch, still clutched in her small fist, like she could not quite bring herself to let go of her only weapon. "Can you ride?" Garrett asked. "Papa was teaching me." "Good enough." He lifted her onto the mare behind the saddle. "Hold on to my belt. Do not let go for anything." The ride back to the ranch was the longest 4 miles of Garrett's life. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into something that shimmered and burned. The woman's breathing grew more labored with each passing minute. The child's small hands gripped his belt so tight he could feel her knuckles digging into his back. Garrett Kane had been alone for 8 years. 8 years of silence and solitude, of watching sunsets by himself and eating meals at an empty table. 8 years of convincing himself that was exactly what he wanted. That isolation was safety. That caring for nothing meant nothing could hurt you. Now, with a dying woman across his saddle and a traumatized child clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had fallen apart, Garrett felt something stir in his chest. Something he had thought long dead and safely buried. When the ranch house finally came into view, a low structure of weathered wood with a barn and corral behind it, Garrett allowed himself one small breath of relief. They had made it this far. Whether that would be enough, only time would tell. The interior of the ranch house was dim and blessedly cooler than the furnace outside. Garrett carried the woman through the door, the child following so close she was practically stepping on his heels. He laid the woman on his own bed, the only real bed in the place, and immediately went to work. The child stood frozen in the doorway, watching as Garrett stripped away the makeshift bandages on her mother's shoulder. The wound beneath was angry and red, radiating heat. Infection had set in deep. He could smell it, that sickly sweet odor of flesh going bad. I need you to help me, Garrett said without looking up. Can you do that? What do you need? There is a well outside. I need cold water. As much as you can carry. He pointed to a row of buckets near the door. Fill those, bring them here. The child moved immediately, grateful perhaps to have a task, something to do, besides stand and watch her mother die. Garrett worked methodically, cleaning the wound with whiskey that made the woman's unconscious body jerk despite her state. He packed it with a poultice of yarrow and comfrey that he kept for his horses. It worked on people just as well if you knew what you were doing. And Garrett knew. The war had taught him that much. By the time the child returned with the first bucket, he was wrapping fresh bandages, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had done this too many times before. Good, he said. Set it there. Now go get another. They worked in tandem as the afternoon bled into evening. Garrett sponged the woman's burning skin with cold water, trying to bring her fever down. The child fetched and carried without complaint, her face set in grim determination. Neither of them spoke beyond what was necessary. As the sun finally began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the woman's fever broke. The tension drained from Garrett's shoulders when he felt her skin cool beneath his hand. She was not out of danger, but she had cleared the first hurdle. The child sat slumped against the wall, her eyes half closed with exhaustion. Garrett realized she had not eaten or had water herself in hours, maybe longer. When did you last eat? He asked. The child blinked slowly. I do not remember. Garrett moved to the kitchen, little more than a corner of the main room, with a cast iron stove and a few rough shelves. He built up the fire and set coffee to boil, then pulled out the remains of yesterday's cornbread and some dried venison. Simple fare, but it was what he had. He brought it to the child on a tin plate. Eat. She took the plate, but did not move to touch the food. Her eyes stayed fixed on her mother. Is Mama going to die? The question hung in the air between them. Garrett could have lied, could have offered easy comfort, but something about the way the child looked at him, those two old eyes in that small face, told him she deserved the truth. I do not know, he said. She is fighting. That is all we can ask for right now. The child nodded slowly, accepting this. Then she picked up a piece of cornbread and began to eat mechanically, chewing and swallowing, without seeming to taste anything. Garrett poured himself coffee and sat in the chair by the bed, watching the woman's chest rise and fall. The rhythm was steadier now, more regular. A good sign. Why did you help us? Garrett turned to look at the child. What kind of question is that? Mama said. Most people do not help unless there is something in it for them. The child's voice was matter of fact, like she was stating simple arithmetic. What is in it for you? Nothing. The child studied him with that unsettling intensity. Then why? Garrett took a sip of coffee, bitter and black. Sometimes people help because it is the right thing to do. Papa used to say that. The child's lower lip trembled. He said there were still good people in the world, even when Mama said there were not. Your Mama had reason to be cautious. Garrett kept his voice gentle. Sounds like she learned not to trust easily. She wanted to stay in Boston. But Papa said there was opportunity out here. Land, a future. The child set down the plate, most of the food untouched. There is no future anymore. Garrett wanted to tell her she was wrong, that there was always a future, that things would get better. But the words stuck in his throat, tasting too much like lies. Get some rest, he said instead. You can sleep right there against the wall. I will watch her. I want to stay with Mama. She needs quiet and you need sleep. The child's jaw set in a stubborn line that Garrett recognized. The look of someone who had made up their mind and would not be moved. I am not leaving her. Garrett recognized when a battle was not worth fighting. Fine. But you sleep. I will watch her. The child curled up on the floor beside the bed, using her small canvas bag as a pillow. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into the deep rhythm of exhausted sleep. Garrett sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the night sounds filtering through the windows. Crickets, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through dry grass. Sounds he had grown used to over 8 years of solitude. Sounds that had become the only company he needed. But tonight, with two strangers sleeping under his roof, the silence felt different. Fuller somehow, like the house itself was waking up from a long sleep. Somewhere around midnight, the woman's eyes opened. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, confusion clouding her features. Then her head turned, taking in the unfamiliar room, and panic flared across her face. Rose. She tried to sit up, her voice raw and desperate. Where is she? She is here. Garrett moved into her line of sight, keeping his voice low. Right beside the bed. She is safe. You are both safe. The woman's gaze found her daughter, and something in her expression crumpled. How? Where my ranch? I found you on the plains. You have been unconscious for about 14 hours. She tried again to rise, and this time Garrett helped her, propping her up with pillows. Her face was pale except for two fever-bright spots on her cheeks. She moved with the careful swiftness of someone in serious pain. The men, she said. Did they follow? They are long gone from what the child told me. Garrett kept his tone matter of fact. Two of them are dead. The third ran off. The woman closed her eyes. Thomas, my husband. They killed him. They came for water, and when we could not give them what they wanted, they shot him. Then they went through our things. When they did not find money, one of them cut me. Said it was to teach me not to waste their time. Rage, cold and sharp, settled in Garrett's gut. He knew men like that, had killed men like that back in another life. The kind who hurt people for sport. The kind who took pleasure in fear. How many, he asked. 3, maybe 4. I was trying to shield Rose. I could not see everything. Her breath hitched. I could not stop them from taking everything. You stopped them from taking what mattered. Garrett kept his voice even. Your daughter is alive. You are alive because of you. The woman looked at him properly for the first time. Her eyes were dark, almost black in the lamplight, and full of an awareness that Garrett recognized. She was measuring him, trying to figure out if he was another threat or something else entirely. Why did you help us? She asked. You do not know us. It was the second time that night someone had asked him that question. Garrett wondered what kind of world they had been living in where kindness required explanation. Like I told Rose, he said it was the right thing to do. The woman studied his face for a long moment. Then finally some of the tension drained from her shoulders. Thank you, she said. I do not know how to repay you. I cannot pay you at all, actually. Her voice broke. Thank you. Garrett stood uncomfortable with gratitude. You need rest and food when you are able. We will talk more in the morning. He moved toward the door, intending to sleep in the barn like he had been planning since they arrived. But the woman's voice stopped him. Mr. Kane? Just Garrett. She hesitated. Garrett, the men who did this, if they come back, will you protect us? Garrett met her eyes. They will not come back. And if they are fool enough to try, they will regret it. He stepped out into the night, letting the door close softly behind him. The air had cooled considerably, and stars filled the sky from horizon to horizon, vast and indifferent. Garrett stood on the porch for a long moment, listening to the silence. In all his years alone on this ranch, he had convinced himself he preferred solitude. It was simpler, safer. People complicated things. They brought trouble and pain and expectations he had never learned how to meet. But tonight, standing under the endless Wyoming sky with two strangers sleeping in his house, Garrett felt something shift inside him. Something he could not quite name, but recognized as dangerous nonetheless. He had saved their lives today. That was supposed to be the end of it. But looking back at the warm glow of lamplight through his window, hearing the soft sound of the child's breathing and the woman's restless movements, Garrett suspected it was only the beginning. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm of careful nursing and cautious recovery. The woman's fever returned twice more each time, less severe than before. Garrett treated it with the same methodical attention he gave to everything else, changing bandages and spooning broth into her when she was awake enough to swallow. The child was a different kind of challenge. She would not speak, not a single word since that first day. She watched Garrett with feral distrust, flinching whenever he moved too fast or reached toward her. She ate only when he was not looking, hiding bread in her pockets and under her pillow like she was storing up for a famine. On the second night, Garrett woke to the sound of screaming. He found the child thrashing in her sleep, caught in the grip of a nightmare so fierce she had torn her blanket in half. When he tried to wake her, she swung at him with tiny fists, eyes wide, but seeing nothing. It took the woman, still weak and trembling, to calm her down. Mother and daughter clung to each other in the darkness, and Garrett retreated to the doorway, feeling like an intruder in his own home. She dreams about that day, the woman whispered later, after the child had finally fallen back asleep. Every night she dreams about watching her father die. Garrett had no words for that. What could you say to a mother watching her child break apart piece by piece? On the fourth morning, the woman was strong enough to sit at the table for breakfast. Garrett had made Johnny cakes and fried salt pork. Simple fare, but the woman ate like it was a feast. "You are a good cook," she said, surprising him. "It is edible. That is about all I aim for. That is more than I managed on the trail." The woman's smile was tentative, the first one he had seen from her. "Everything I made tasted like smoke and desperation." Garrett almost smiled. Almost. After breakfast, he went about his morning chores, while the woman rested and the child sat in the corner, watching. Always watching. He was mucking out the horse stall when movement at the barn door made him turn. The child stood there small and silent, clutching that same canvas bag she had been carrying since he found her. Garrett set down his pitchfork. "Need something?" The child shook her head, then after a long moment of consideration, she walked over to where the barn cats had made their home in a pile of hay. The mother cat had a litter of kittens, maybe 3 weeks old, all tumbling over each other in a fuzzy heap. The child knelt down and reached out one careful hand. The mother cat sniffed her fingers, then allowed the touch. One of the kittens, a gray and white ball of fluff, wobbled over and climbed into the child's lap. She looked up at Garrett with something like wonder in her eyes. And then for the first time since he had found her, she spoke. "Kitty," one word, just one word. But it cracked something open in Garrett's chest that he had thought sealed shut forever. "That is right," he said, his voice rough with emotion he did not want to name. "That is a kitty." The child turned back to the kitten, stroking its tiny head with a gentleness that made Garrett's throat tight. She did not speak again that day, but it did not matter. She had started. That evening, the woman felt well enough to help with supper. They worked in silence at first, the only sounds the sizzle of meat in the pan and the crackle of the fire. But Garrett could feel her watching him, trying to piece together who he was. "You live here alone," she said finally. It was not quite a question. "Have for 8 years. Why?" Garrett's hands stilled on the pot he was stirring. "Because I wanted to." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have got." The woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Rose likes you." Garrett looked up surprised. "She does not even talk to me. She does not talk to anyone. But she watches you, follows you around. This morning when you went to the barn, she went after you." The woman's eyes were soft. "She has not shown interest in anything since Thomas died. Until you." Garrett did not know what to do with that information, so he changed the subject. "Your shoulder is healing well. Another week, maybe 2, and you should be able to travel." "Travel where?" The question hung between them. "Back east, I suppose." Garrett kept his voice neutral. "Thomas had a brother in Ohio you mentioned. If you can get word to him, you got money for passage." The silence that followed was answer enough. "The men took everything," the woman said finally. "Every cent we had. Then you cannot leave." Garrett's voice came out harsher than he intended. "Not until you have got the means to. I cannot impose on you forever." "You are not imposing." The woman set down the wooden spoon she had been holding. "Garrett, you have been more than kind, more than generous, but Rose and I need to figure out what comes next. Where we go from here." Garrett turned to face her fully. "You go nowhere until you are healed, until Rose stops flinching at shadows, until you have got a plan that does not end with you and that little girl starving on the side of some road." The woman's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger, might have been gratitude. It was hard to tell. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You do not know us. We are strangers who showed up on your doorstep half dead. Why does it matter to you what happens to us?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment, searching for an answer that made sense even to himself. "I have been alone a long time," he said finally. "Built this ranch from nothing. Worked it by myself. Chose that life. Chose the quiet." He met her eyes. "But choosing to be alone is different from standing by when people need help. I might prefer solitude, but I am not heartless." The woman studied his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her because she nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "We will stay for now." For now, they finished cooking supper in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. More comfortable, like something had shifted between them, some unspoken agreement reached. Later that night, after the child had fallen asleep in the loft, the woman sat in the rocking chair by the cold fireplace while Garrett cleaned his rifle at the table. The lamplight cast shadows across her face, highlighting the hollows under her eyes and the sharp line of her cheekbones. Can I ask you something, she said. You can ask. Does not mean I will answer. Fair enough. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Rose said something when she was feverish. When we first got here, she said you told her about your daughter. Garrett's hands went still on the rifle. She must have been dreaming. The woman continued, mixing things up. You do not have a daughter. I would have seen signs, toys, clothes, something. The silence stretched so long that the woman started to apologize for prying, but Garrett's voice stopped her. I did, he said. Her name was Abigail. She died 8 years ago. Her and her mother both. Fever took them within a week of each other. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. Garrett, I am so sorry. I did not know. No reason you would. Garrett resumed cleaning the rifle, his movements careful and precise. It was a long time ago. That does not make it hurt less. No, Garrett looked up and something raw flickered in his eyes before he shuddered it away. No, it does not. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft rasp of cloth against metal. Is that why you live alone? The woman asked finally. Because of them. Partly. Garrett set down the rifle. After they died, I was not fit company for anyone. Did some things I am not proud of. Hurt people I should not have hurt. Figured it was better for everyone if I just disappeared. The woman leaned forward. What kind of things? Garrett's jaw tightened. The kind that make a man afraid of himself. Before the woman could respond, a sound from the loft made them both look up. The child was crying in her sleep, soft whimpers that cut through the quiet like knife blades. The woman rose immediately, but Garrett held up a hand. Let me try, please. The woman hesitated, then nodded. Garrett climbed the ladder to the loft, moving slowly so the child would hear him coming. She was tangled in her blankets, tears streaming down her face, trapped in whatever nightmare had her in its grip. Easy now, Garrett said, keeping his voice low and steady. You are safe. You are in my house. No one is going to hurt you. The child's eyes flew open, wild with fear. For a moment, she did not seem to know where she was. Then her gaze focused on Garrett's face and something in her relaxed. Papa, she whispered. Garrett's heart stopped. Then the child blinked and the words seemed to register. Her face crumpled. I thought you were, I know. Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But she did not. His hands settled gently on her hair. I know, it is all right. The child stared at him for a long moment. Then she threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his shoulder, her small body shaking with grief she had been holding inside for weeks. Garrett held her. He did not know what else to do. He just held her and let her cry and felt something crack open inside his chest that he had thought would never heal. When the woman climbed up to check on them, she found the child asleep in Garrett's arms, her face finally peaceful. She looked at Garrett with something in her eyes that he could not quite read. Thank you, she whispered. Garrett just nodded, not trusting his voice. Something was changing in this house. Something was changing in him. And for the first time in 8 years, Garrett Kane was not sure if that terrified him or gave him hope. 3 weeks passed. A tentative family formed in that small ranch house built on shared meals and quiet evenings in the slow, careful work of learning to trust. The child started speaking again, first in single words, then in halting sentences. She still had nightmares, still flinched at loud noises, still hoarded food under her pillow when she thought no one was looking. But the fierce terror in her eyes was fading, replaced by something softer, something like hope. Garrett taught her to read from an old McGuffey's reader that had belonged to his sister decades ago. The child was bright, hungry for knowledge, her small finger tracing the letters with intense concentration. She demanded explanations for everything. Why the sky was blue, why horses needed shoes, why the K in knife was silent. That last one Garrett had no answer for. It is stupid, the child declared. Mind your tongue, the woman said sharply. But it is stupid, the child insisted. Garrett bit back a smile. Cannot argue with that. But stupid or not, it is what we have got. The woman took over household management with quiet efficiency. The bachelor dwelling that had been nothing but 4 walls and a roof for 8 years started to feel like something else. Curtains appeared in the windows. Dried herbs hung in bunches by the door. The smell of baking bread replaced the musty emptiness that had settled into the corners. The house that had been silent for so long now had laughter in it. One morning, Garrett slipped away before dawn. The woman and child were still sleeping, and he needed to visit a place he had been avoiding for months. Behind the barn, under a gnarled cottonwood tree, two wooden crosses stood side by side. The names carved into them had weathered over 8 years, but Garrett knew them by heart. Anne Kane, beloved wife. Abigail Kane, precious daughter. Garrett knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds that had grown up around the graves. He had not come here since spring. It hurt too much. And what was the point of talking to people who could not answer? But today the words came. Anne, he said, his voice rough, something is happening. There is a woman and a little girl living in our house, in your house. They needed help. And I gave it. He trailed off, struggling. I am feeling something again. Scares the hell out of me. The wind picked up, rustling the cottonwood leaves overhead. Garrett closed his eyes. Abby, you would like Rose. She is tough. Pretends she is not scared, just like you used to. She asked me yesterday why the horses do not wear hats if the sun is so hot. A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh or a sob. He was not sure which. I do not know what I am doing. I do not know if this is right. But for the first time in 8 years, I do not want to be alone anymore. And I do not know what to do with that. He stayed there until the sun cleared the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. When he finally stood, his knees ached and his eyes were dry and burning. He turned to head back to the house and stopped cold. The woman stood at the edge of the barn watching him. She had clearly been there for a while, long enough to hear everything. Garrett's jaw tightened. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. The woman walked toward him, her movements careful. I did not mean to intrude. I woke up and you were gone. I was worried. Nothing to worry about. I can see that now. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes moving from Garrett to the graves and back. Anne and Abigail. Garrett nodded once, not trusting his voice. The woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I understand now. Why you keep everyone at a distance, why you built this life alone. Do you? Yes, because you love them, and losing them broke something inside you. And you are terrified of letting anyone get close enough to break you again. Garrett stared at her. No one had ever seen him so clearly. No one had ever put into words the thing he had been running from for 8 years. It is easier to be alone, he said finally. Easier, the woman agreed. But is it better? Garrett did not have an answer for that. They walked back to the house together, not speaking. The child was awake, sitting at the table with one of the barn kittens in her lap. Mama, she called. Can I keep her? We are guests here, Rose. You need to ask Mr. Kane. The child turned those big eyes on Garrett. Please, I will take care of her, I promise. Garrett looked at the kitten, then at the child, then at the woman. 3 weeks ago, he had been alone. Now there were 3 females in his house, one of them covered in gray fur. Fine, he said, but she stays in the barn at night. The child's face lit up like sunrise. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She jumped up and threw her arms around his legs. Garrett stood frozen, unsure how to respond. His eyes met the woman's over the child's head. The woman was smiling, a real smile, the first one he had seen from her. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges that grief had carved there. Something twisted in Garrett's chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. That afternoon, Garrett rode into town for supplies. He needed flour and coffee and nails for a fence repair, but mostly he needed space to think. The house that had been his sanctuary for 8 years was starting to feel crowded in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. Bitter Creek was not much of a town, a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other buildings serving the scattered ranches and homesteads in the territory. Garrett conducted his business quickly, avoiding conversation where he could. But the storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Henderson, was impossible to avoid. Garrett Kane, she said, her eyes bright with curiosity. I heard you have company out at the ranch. News travels fast. In a town this size, news is all we have. Mrs. Henderson leaned across the counter. A widow woman and her little girl is what I heard. You playing Good Samaritan, something like that. Well, Mrs. Henderson smiled knowingly. It is about time you had some company out there. Man should not be alone forever. Garrett paid for his supplies without responding and escaped before she could ask more questions. But her words stuck with him on the ride back to the ranch. A man should not be alone forever. He had told himself for 8 years that alone was what he wanted, what he needed, that the emptiness inside him was a choice, not a sentence. But riding up to his house now, seeing the smoke rising from the chimney and the curtains in the windows, hearing the child's laughter carrying across the yard, Garrett wondered if he had been lying to himself all along. He found the woman on the porch shelling peas into a bowl. She looked up when he dismounted. "You were gone a long time. Town was busy." Was it? The woman's eyes were knowing, or did you just need time to think? Garrett did not answer. He carried his supplies inside and put them away, trying to ignore the way the woman's presence seemed to fill every corner of his house. After supper, the child demanded a story. She had found a book of fairy tales on one of Garrett's shelves, probably left behind by his sister years ago, and she would not rest until someone read to her. The woman started to volunteer, but the child shook her head. "I want Garrett to read it." Garrett looked at the woman helplessly. She just smiled and handed him the book. So Garrett Kane, who had not read a bedtime story to anyone in 8 years, found himself sitting by lamplight with a 5-year-old on his lap, stumbling through the tale of Cinderella, while the child corrected his pronunciation of the French words. When she finally fell asleep, the woman helped him carry her up to the loft. They stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. This child who had witnessed horrors no child should know, and still found it in her to laugh at a kitten and demand fairy tales. "She is remarkable," the woman whispered. "After everything, she still believes in happy endings. Kids are resilient. Some kids." The woman turned to face him, and in the lamplight, her eyes looked impossibly dark. "Some kids just break." She did not break. "No," the woman's voice was soft, "because you gave her something to hold on to. I did not do anything special. You did. You do every day." She reached out and touched his arm just briefly. "Thank you, Garrett, for everything." She climbed down from the loft, leaving Garrett standing there with his heart pounding and his thoughts in chaos. He was in trouble, deep, dangerous trouble, because somewhere in the past 3 weeks, the woman and child had stopped being strangers he was helping. They had started becoming something else, something that terrified him, something that felt a lot like family, and Garrett Kane had no idea what to do with that. Garrett rode to town the next week for supplies, leaving the woman and child alone for the first time since they had arrived. The woman insisted she was fine. The wound had healed enough. She could handle the house. Garrett should stop hovering. He was not hovering. He was just being careful. But the woman's jaw had that stubborn set to it, and Garrett had learned that arguing with her was like arguing with a fence post. Pointless and exhausting. "I will be back before dark," he said, mounting his buckskin mare. "We will be fine." The woman stood on the porch, one hand shading her eyes against the morning sun. "Go." Garrett rode. He was about 2 miles from town when the feeling hit him. That prickle at the back of his neck that had saved his life more times than he could count during the war. The instinct that said something was wrong. He reined in his horse, scanning the horizon. Nothing. Just empty plains stretching in every direction under an endless blue sky. But the feeling would not go away. Garrett turned his horse around and rode hard for the ranch. He heard the screaming before he saw the house. The child's voice, high and terrified, cutting through the hot afternoon air like a blade. 3 horses were tied outside his ranch. 3 men he did not recognize were on his property. One of them was holding the child, her small body thrashing as she tried to break free. Another was inside the house. Garrett could hear him moving around, breaking things. And the third, the leader, by the look of him, had the woman by the hair with a knife pressed to her throat. Garrett saw red. He did not remember dismounting, did not remember drawing his rifle, did not remember anything except the cold, killing rage that flooded through him like ice water, washing away everything else. The first outlaw died before he even knew Garrett was there. Shot through the throat, dead before he hit the ground. The second one came running out of the house, gun drawn. Garrett put a bullet through his chest and kept moving. The leader, a man with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes like dead fish, pressed the knife harder against the woman's throat. Blood trickled where the blade had already nicked her skin. "Stop right there or I cut her open." Garrett stopped, but he did not lower his rifle. "Let them go." The man laughed. It was an ugly sound, wet and cruel. 3 against 1. "You think you are calling the shots here, friend? You do not got nothing but that rifle and a whole lot of stupid." The child was sobbing, still struggling against the dead man's grip. The body had fallen, but his arm was tangled in her dress, trapping her. Garrett's finger tightened on the trigger. "Your mother sent you," the woman said suddenly. Her voice was steady despite the blade at her throat. "Did she not, Brennan?" The outlaw's eyes narrowed. How do you know my name? You work for Victoria Hartford. You killed my husband. The woman's voice turned to steel. Tell your mother she can go straight to hell. In the split second that the man's attention was on the woman, his knife shifted just slightly, exposing his shoulder. Garrett saw his opening. The bullet took the man in the eye. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, dead before he knew what hit him. The woman stumbled free, clutching her bleeding neck. Garrett was already moving, pulling the child from under the dead man's arm, gathering both of them against his chest. It is over. His voice was rough. It is over. You are safe. But his hands were shaking. And when he looked down at the three bodies lying in his yard, at the blood pooling in the dust, something dark and satisfied stirred in his chest. Not dead enough, the thought came unbidden, and it terrified him. That night, after the bodies had been buried and the child had finally cried herself to sleep, the woman found Garrett sitting on the porch in the darkness. You need to tell me what happened, she said. You saw what happened. No. The woman sat down beside him. I saw you kill 3 men in under 10 seconds. I saw the look in your eyes when you did it. That was not just protection, Garrett. That was something else. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to talk. After Ann and Abigail died, I went to a dark place. Spent 6 months in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. One night I was in a saloon in Cheyenne. Some drunk said something about my dead daughter. Something cruel. His hands clenched. I broke 14 bones in that man. Yeet, ribs, arm, leg. Kept hitting until my hands were covered in blood. Sheriff pulled me off. The man was in a coma for 3 weeks. The woman said nothing, just listened. That is when I realized something. Garrett continued. I was not mad because he insulted Abby. I was mad because I wanted an excuse to hurt someone. I wanted to feel pain on the outside instead of the inside. And I enjoyed it. That is what scared me. I enjoyed breaking that man. He finally looked at the woman. There is something wrong inside me. Something dark. War made it, grief fed it. And today when I saw Brennan with that knife at your throat, I wanted to kill all 3 of them. Slowly. Not because it was necessary, because I wanted to. The woman studied his face in the starlight. Are you asking me if I am afraid of you? I am telling you that you should be. She reached out and took his hand. The same hand that had killed 3 men hours ago. Garrett, I have seen real monsters. Men who hurt for pleasure. Men who kill for sport. You are not one of them. How do you know? Because you are sitting here in the dark, torturing yourself over what you did. She moved closer, her shoulder pressing against his. Monsters do not feel guilt. You do. That is the difference. Garrett did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Just sat there in the darkness with the woman's hand in his, feeling the cold knot in his chest slowly begin to loosen. They stayed like that until the stars faded and the eastern sky began to lighten. Not speaking, just being. And somewhere in the silence, something shifted between them. Some wall came down, some bridge was built. Garrett did not have a name for it yet, but he knew with bone-deep certainty that things would never be the same. A week after the attack, Chester Whitmore arrived. Garrett was in the barn when he heard the horse, a single rider on a fine sorrel that looked too clean for trail work. The man who dismounted was perhaps 50, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Garrett's entire ranch. Silver threaded through dark hair, and his hands were soft, the kind that had never held anything heavier than a pen. A lawyer. Garrett could spot them a mile away. Help you with something? Garrett stepped out of the barn, rifle casually held in the crook of his arm. The man turned, and his smile was all politeness, with nothing warm behind it. Good morning. I am looking for Garrett Kane. Would that be you? Depends on who is asking. My name is Chester Whitmore. I am an attorney from Cheyenne. I represent the Hartford family of Boston. Garrett's grip tightened on the rifle. Do not know any Hartfords. Perhaps not by name. Whitmore's eyes drifted past Garrett toward the house. But I have reason to believe you may have encountered a woman and child traveling west. Clara Hartford and her daughter Rose Wright. What is your interest in them? I am afraid that is confidential client business. Whitmore's smile never wavered. But I can assure you the Hartford family has only the child's best interests at heart. The door to the house opened. The woman stepped onto the porch. The color drained from her face as she took in the scene. Chester Whitmore, she said, and her voice carried the weight of old fear. I should have known my mother would send you. Whitmore's smile widened. Clara. How delightful to see you looking so well, considering your recent ordeal. What do you want? I think you know. He pulled a folded paper from his satchel. This is a court order granting temporary custody of Rose Wright to the Hartford family pending a full hearing. Your mother is prepared to provide for the child. All you have to do is be reasonable. Reasonable, the woman's laugh was bitter. That is what she called it when she tried to force me to marry the man she chose. When she cut me off for choosing Daniel. When she told me I was dead to her. She descended the porch steps. I will not let you take my daughter. I am afraid it is not your choice to make. Whitmore's tone remained pleasant, which somehow made it worse. The law is quite clear. A mother in your circumstances, no income, no prospects, no permanent residence, is in no position to care for a child. The court will side with the Hartfords. The child appeared in the doorway, her face pinched with fear. Mama, go back inside, sweetheart. But Mama, now Rose. The child retreated, but Garrett could see her shadow through the window watching. Whitmore cleared his throat. There is no need for this to become unpleasant. The Hartfords are prepared to be generous. They will cover all your medical expenses. Provide you with a settlement. Allow supervised visits once you have stabilized your situation. How generous, the woman said coldly. They will pay me to give up my child. They are offering you a fresh start. Without the burden of a child, you could rebuild your life, find employment, perhaps remarry eventually. Rose is not a burden. Of course not. Whitmore's patience was wearing thin. But sentiment aside, you must consider what is best for the child. I know what my mother can provide, the woman said. I grew up in that house. I know exactly what kind of life Rose would have. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a long scar on her forearm. This is from when I was 16. My mother slammed the carriage door on me because I dared to disagree with her. Victoria Hartford does not love children. She controls them. And I will not do that to Rose. Garrett stepped forward, positioning himself between Whitmore and the woman. Seems to me the lady has made her position clear. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. And who exactly are you, Mr. Kane? What is your relationship to Mrs. Wright? I am the man whose property you are standing on. Garrett's voice was flat. What does a man like you expect in return for his charity? A woman alone, grateful, perhaps pliable? Watch your mouth. I am simply pointing out that your motives may be questioned. Whitmore surveyed the ranch with barely hidden disgust. A single woman residing with an unmarried man. No chaperone. It does not look good. Does it? One might wonder about the propriety of the situation. The woman's hands clenched. How dare you? I dare because I am thinking of the child. Whitmore slipped the court order back into his satchel. You have 1 week to respond to the petition, Mrs. Wright. If you contest it, there will be a hearing in Cheyenne. I strongly suggest you consider the inevitable outcome before you put yourself and your daughter through that ordeal. He mounted his horse. Good day to you both. They watched him ride away, dust rising in his wake. The woman stood rigid, her arms wrapped around herself. This is my fault. I brought this here, Number Garnet's voice was firm. This is not your fault. Your mother, Victoria, she is the one doing this. But you are caught in it now, she looked at him. Because of me. Because I chose to help. Garrett met her eyes. And I do not regret that. The child came running out of the house. Mama, is he going to take me away? The woman knelt down, pulling her daughter close. No, baby, I will not let that happen. But how? The child's voice was small. We do not have money. We do not have anywhere to go. Garrett looked at them, mother and daughter clinging to each other, both terrified, both alone, except they were not alone, not anymore. There is one thing that would strengthen your case, he said slowly. Marriage. Court favors intact families. The woman looked up at him, eyes wide. If you were my wife, you would have a name, a home. This ranch, 2,000 acres. Garrett forced himself to continue. The court would have a harder time claiming you are unfit. You are suggesting a marriage of convenience. I am suggesting protection. A legal arrangement. Nothing more. Why? The woman stood. Why would you do this? You barely know us. This would tie you to a situation that is not your problem. Garrett looked past her at the child who was watching him with those two old eyes. 8 years ago, I did not protect my wife and daughter. They died while I was gone. When I came home, it was too late. He looked back at the woman. I have lived with that guilt every day since. I cannot save Anne and Abigail, but I can save you and Rose. Do not take that chance away from me. The woman's eyes filled with tears. This is not fair to you. You will be bound to a loveless marriage. I buried my heart 8 years ago. Garrett's voice was rough. I have got nothing to offer except my name and this house. And if later you want your freedom, then we will deal with that when it comes. Right now, the question is simple. Will you marry me or not? The child stepped forward. She walked to Garrett and reached up, placing her small hand on his cheek. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Garrett froze. Please stay, the child whispered. Please do not leave us. Garrett's eyes closed. When they opened, there were tears. I am not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise. The child turned to her mother and nodded. Yes, do it. The woman looked at Garrett for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. All right, I accept. They shook hands. Formal, distant, a business transaction. But when Garrett's hand closed around hers, when their eyes met across that small space, both of them felt it. The spark, the connection, the possibility of something more. And both of them pretended they did not. As they stood there, neither noticed the man watching from the tree line 200 yards away. One of Victoria Hartford's hired men already composing his telegram in his head. Subject has found protection. Rancher named Garrett Kane, former soldier. Dangerous. Require instructions. The reply would come within hours. Find his weakness. Everyone has one. Use it. The wedding took place 3 days later in the Bitter Creek Church. Reverend Thomas officiated, his discomfort evident in every line of his body. His wife Martha served as witness, her eyes kind but questioning. The child held a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning, her face solemn. Garrett wore a black suit he had not touched in 8 years. It smelled of cedar and memories. The woman wore a simple dress, pale blue, with small flowers embroidered at the collar. The only good dress she had left. When Reverend Thomas asked if Garrett would take Clara as his wife, Garrett said yes without hesitation. When he asked the woman the same question, she paused, just for a moment. Her eyes found Garrett's across the small space between them. I will, she said. The kiss was brief, formal, a contract sealed. But when Garrett pulled back, something flickered in the woman's eyes that had not been there before. Outside the church, Chester Whitmore was waiting. 2 large men flanked him, hired muscle by the look of them. A marriage of convenience, he said smoothly. How touching. Convenient or not, Garrett said, she is my wife now. The child is my legal daughter. You want them, you go through me. Whitmore smiled thinly. The hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. I trust you will both be in attendance. He mounted his horse and rode away, the 2 men following. The wedding night was awkward. Garrett insisted the woman and child take the bedroom. He would sleep in the barn. This is your home, the woman protested. I cannot take your bed. You are my wife now. Garrett kept his voice neutral. Legally, this is your home too. They stood in the main room, neither knowing quite what to do or say. The child, exhausted from the day's events, had already fallen asleep in the loft, curled around her kitten. Thank you, the woman said finally, for doing this, for protecting us. Garrett nodded. We should get some rest. Long days ahead. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Garrett, I know this is just an arrangement, but I want you to know I will try to be a good wife, in whatever ways you need. I do not need anything, Garrett said. Just keep Rose safe. That is enough. He walked out to the barn, leaving the woman standing alone in the house that was now legally hers. But as he lay in the hay, staring up at the barn rafters, Garrett could not shake the feeling that he had just made either the best or worst decision of his life. 2 nights before they were to leave for Cheyenne, Clara woke gasping in the darkness. Garrett, sleeping at the barn, heard her cry out and ran to the house. He found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a telegram that had been slipped under the door. Her hands trembled as she held it. What is it? Garrett asked, his heart pounding. She handed it to him without a word. The telegram read, Your mother knows about the child you carry. She will use it to claim you unstable, hysterical, unfit. Leave Cheyenne now or lose everything. A friend who cares. Who sent this? Garrett demanded, checking the signature. There was none. Clara's voice was hollow. I do not know. But if Victoria knows I am with child, she will twist it. Say I am emotional, irrational. That pregnancy makes me incapable of caring for Rose. Garrett knelt beside her chair. Then we tell the judge first. Before Victoria can. We control what he hears and how he hears it. What if he agrees with her? What if he thinks I am too unstable? You are the strongest woman I have ever known. Garrett took her hands. And if he cannot see that, then he is a fool. But we do not hide this. We face it head on. Clara looked at him, tears streaming down her face. I am so scared, Garrett. I know. Me too, but we face it together. This was the twist neither of them had seen coming. Victoria had eyes everywhere, and she was always 3 moves ahead. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. They were married but strangers, living together but separate, learning to navigate the space between what they were and what they pretended to be. The woman took over the household with quiet efficiency. She cooked meals that were more than just fuel. She mended clothes Garrett had been meaning to fix for months. She sang softly while she worked old hymns that filled the empty spaces. The child bloomed. With each passing day, she spoke more, laughed more, ventured further from her mother's side. She followed Garrett everywhere, chattering about everything and nothing, asking questions he could not always answer. Why do clouds float? Why do chickens have feathers, but snakes do not? If God made everything, who made God? That last one stumped him completely. And in the evenings after the child was asleep, Garrett and the woman would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about small things. The weather, the ranch, careful conversations that stayed far away from anything that mattered. But there were moments, small moments that neither acknowledged but both felt. The woman's hand brushing his as she passed him coffee. Garrett catching her, watching him work, something soft in her expression. The way they had started moving around each other like dancers who knew the steps without being taught. On the 10th day, Garrett came back from checking fence lines to find the woman crying in the barn, silent tears streaming down her face as she tried to compose herself. What happened is, Rose all right? Rose is fine. The woman wiped at her eyes. I am sorry. I did not expect you back so soon. What is wrong? Nothing, everything. She laughed, a broken sound. I just realized what you have done for us, what you have sacrificed, and I do not know how to repay that. I do not want repayment. I know. That is what makes it worse. The woman looked at him. You are a good man, Garrett Kane. Better than you think you are. Garrett stepped closer. I am not good. I told you about the darkness. Everyone has darkness. The woman reached up and touched his face just briefly. The difference is what we do with it. You use yours to protect. That makes you good. They stood there in the dim barn, so close Garrett could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. So close he could feel her breath. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly it ached. But this was an arrangement, a contract, nothing more. He stepped back. We should go inside, he said. Going to rain soon. The woman nodded, disappointment flickering across her face. Yes, of course. That night, Garrett could not sleep. He kept thinking about the way she had looked at him in the barn, the way her hand had felt against his skin, the way his whole body had responded to her nearness. This was supposed to be simple. Protection in exchange for a name. Nothing complicated, nothing real. But somewhere along the way it had stopped being simple. Somewhere along the way Garrett had started to care. And that terrified him more than any outlaw or court battle ever could. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray. Garrett woke in the barn to find frost on the ground, unseasonable for late August, but not unheard of in Wyoming. He dressed quickly, his hands stiff with cold and something else. Nerves, maybe. He had not been nervous before a fight since the war. But this was different. This was not bullets and blood. This was words and law, and Garrett had never been good with either. When he entered the house, the woman was already awake, helping the child into her best dress. The little one looked pale, her eyes too big in her small face. Do I have to go? The child asked. Yes, sweetheart. The woman's voice was gentle but firm. The judge needs to see you. What if he takes me away? He will not. Garrett spoke from the doorway. I promise you, Rose, we will not let that happen. The child ran to him, burying her face in his chest. I am scared, Papa Garrett. The name hit him like a fist. She had been calling him that more and more, but it never got easier to hear, never stopped making his throat tight. I know, he said, lifting her up, but sometimes being brave means doing things even when we are scared. Can you be brave today? The child nodded against his shoulder. That is my girl. Porter Hawthorne arrived an hour later, his buggy loaded with documents and law books. He was a sharp-eyed man in his early 40s with the kind of face that missed nothing. He had served under Garrett during the war, and Garrett had saved his life during a Confederate ambush outside Richmond. Porter had never forgotten. They have a strong case, Porter said without preamble, spreading papers across Garrett's kitchen table. Victoria Hartford has wealth, social standing, and blood relation. She is arguing that Clara is unstable, that you are violent, that Rose needs proper upbringing. What do we have? The truth, Porter looked up. But truth does not always win in court. We need more. Like what character witnesses? People who can testify to your marriage being legitimate, your home being stable, Rose's well-being improving. We have been married less than 3 weeks, which is why Whitmore will argue it is a sham. Porter tapped the papers. We need the town behind you, the reverend, the doctor, anyone who has seen you together as a family. Garrett looked at the woman. She sat very still. Her hands folded in her lap, but he could see the fear in her eyes. We will get the witnesses, he said, whatever it takes. There is one more thing. Porter pulled out a telegram. I have been investigating Victoria Hartford. Her husband Harrison died 4 months ago. Heart attack, according to the death certificate. But I found something interesting. He slid a document across the table. Harrison's will. He left the bulk of his estate in a trust for Rose. $200,000. With Victoria as trustee until Rose turns 21. The woman gasped. I did not know it was that much. Victoria does not just want Rose out of love, Porter said. She wants control of that money. And if anything happens to you, Clara, if you are declared unfit or worse, Victoria gets everything. The woman's face went white. She had Thomas killed for the life insurance. Now she wants me gone so she can control Rose's inheritance. Can we prove that Garrett asked? Not yet, but I am working on it. Porter gathered his papers. The hearing is tomorrow at 10. Be ready. After Porter left, the woman sat at the table staring at nothing. Garrett sent Rose outside to play with the barn cats, then sat down across from his wife. We are going to win this, he said. Are we? The woman's voice was hollow. Victoria has everything. Money, power, lawyers who know how to twist the truth. We have something she does not. What each other? The woman looked up, and for the first time since Whitmore had arrived, something like hope flickered in her eyes. That night, neither of them could sleep. Garrett found the woman on the porch long after midnight, wrapped in a shawl, staring out at the dark plains. You should rest, he said. I cannot. Every time I close my eyes, I see them taking Rose away. Garrett sat beside her. That is not going to happen. You cannot promise that. No, but I can promise I will fight like hell to prevent it. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the wind moving through the grass. Can I ask you something, the woman said finally. Always. Why did you really marry me? Not the reason you told Rose. The real reason. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. I told you. I could not save Anne and Abigail. This was a chance to save someone. That is part of it. The woman turned to look at him, but not all of it. Garrett met her eyes. The truth is I was tired of being alone. Tired of talking to ghosts and living in the past. You and Rose, you made me remember what it felt like to have a reason to wake up in the morning. He looked away. I know this started as an arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became more. For me, at least. For me, too, the woman whispered. Garrett turned back to her. What I think I started falling for you the day you taught Rose to read. She was struggling with a word, getting frustrated. You were so patient with her, so gentle. And I thought this man who thinks he is broken, he has so much love inside him. He just does not know it. Garrett could not breathe. Clara, I know this is not what you signed up for. The woman, Clara, her voice shook. I know you married me to help, not because you wanted a real wife, but I need you to know if things were different, if we had met another way, I would choose you. I would choose this. Clara, Garrett reached for her hand. I am choosing this. I am choosing you, even though it scares you, especially because it scares me. He pulled her close, and when their lips met, it was nothing like the brief formal kiss at their wedding. This was real. This was everything they had been holding back for weeks, pouring out in a single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I love you, Clara said. I did not want to. I fought it, but I do. I love you too. Garrett rested his forehead against hers. That is why I have to protect you, why I will do whatever it takes. They sat together on the porch until dawn, holding each other, gathering strength for the battle ahead. Neither of them noticed the rider who had been watching from the ridge, another of Victoria's men taking notes, documenting everything. By the time the sun rose, the report was already on its way to Cheyenne. Subject and target displaying genuine affection. Marriage appears legitimate. Recommend alternate strategy. The reply came within hours. Understood. Proceeding to contingency plan. Prepare for extraction. The ride to Cheyenne took most of the day. They traveled in Porter's buggy, Rose sitting between Garrett and Clara, quiet and watchful. The child had not spoken since breakfast, and her silence worried Garrett more than tears would have. The town of Cheyenne was bigger than Bitter Creek, with actual streets and buildings that rose 2 and 3 stories. The courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and with white columns that were meant to inspire confidence in justice. Garrett just found them cold. Porter had reserved rooms at a modest hotel. They settled in, and Garrett tried to distract Rose with stories while Clara paced the small room like a caged animal. "What if the judge does not believe us?" she said for the 10th time. "Then we will appeal," Porter said from the doorway. "And if that does not work, we will find another way." "What other way?" Porter exchanged a glance with Garrett. "Let us focus on tomorrow, one step at a time." But Garrett saw the worry in the lawyer's eyes, and he knew Porter was not telling them everything. That night, after Rose finally fell asleep, Garrett slipped out to meet Porter in the hotel lobby. "What are you not saying?" Porter sighed. "I got word this afternoon. Victoria Hartford is already in town. She arrived yesterday with 6 hired men. Private security, supposedly. You think she is planning something? I think a woman who had her son-in-law murdered is capable of anything." Porter handed Garrett a small pistol. "Keep this close, and do not let Clara or Rose out of your sight." Garrett took the gun. "If she tries anything." "I know." Porter's face was grim. "Just try to let the law handle it first." Garrett returned to the room to find Clara sitting by the window watching the street below. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." Neither of them moved. Clara said softly, "If something happens tomorrow, if they take Rose, they will not. But if they do." She turned to face him. "Promise me you will not do anything rash. I could not bear it if you went to prison because of us." Garrett crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "If they take Rose, there is no law in this territory that could stop me from getting her back. That is what I am afraid of. Then we make sure it does not come to that." They stood together at the window watching the night deepen over Cheyenne, both knowing that tomorrow would change everything. The courtroom was packed when they arrived the next morning. Garrett had not expected so many people, but apparently the case had drawn attention. A wealthy Boston matriarch versus a Wyoming rancher fighting over a child and a fortune. It made for good gossip, if nothing else. Victoria Hartford sat in the front row, and Garrett got his first look at the woman who had caused so much pain. She was in her late 50s, still beautiful in a cold, sharp way, dressed in black silk diamonds at her throat. Everything about her screamed money and power. When her eyes met Clara's, there was no warmth. No recognition of the daughter she claimed to love. Only calculation. Chester Whitmore sat beside her, perfectly groomed, perfectly confident. Judge Morrison entered, and everyone rose. He was a stern-faced man in his 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. His reputation was that of a fair judge, but a strict one. Garrett hoped that would be enough. The hearing began with Whitmore's opening statement. He painted Clara as unstable, grief-stricken, making poor decisions. He painted Garrett as violent, isolated, potentially dangerous. He painted Victoria as a concerned grandmother, only wanting what was best for her granddaughter. It was a masterful performance, and Garrett could see the judge taking notes. Porter's turn came next. He focused on Clara's rights as a mother on the stable home they had built on Rose's visible improvement since coming to the ranch. But Whitmore had witnesses. Boston society women who testified that Clara had always been rebellious, difficult. A doctor who claimed Clara had been treated for hysteria in her youth. A private investigator who detailed Garrett's violent past, including the incident in Cheyenne where he had nearly killed a man. Each witness chipped away at their case. Each testimony made Garrett's hands clench tighter. Then Whitmore called Victoria to the stand. She was perfect, poised, concerned. Every word carefully chosen to portray herself as a loving grandmother who only wanted to save her granddaughter from poverty and instability. When Porter cross-examined, he tried to bring up Thomas's death, Harrison's suspicious heart attack, the trust fund that gave Victoria motive. But without proof, it was just insinuation. And Judge Morrison sustained most of Whitmore's objections. By the time they broke for lunch, Garrett could feel their case slipping away. Porter pulled them aside in the hallway. "We need something more. The judge is not convinced the marriage is real. He thinks you did it for the custody case." "It is real," Clara said desperately. "I know, but we need to prove it." Porter looked at Garrett. "Tomorrow you are going to testify, and you need to make the judge believe what you feel." Garrett nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead, planning for what might come if words were not enough. That afternoon they called character witnesses. Reverend Thomas testified that he had married them, that he believed their commitment was genuine. Martha Collins spoke about seeing them together, about the way Garrett looked at Clara and Rose. Sheriff Clayton testified about Garrett's character, about the war heroism that Porter had carefully documented. Doc Miller spoke about Rose's improvement, her trauma healing in a stable, loving environment. It helped. Garrett could see it in the judge's face. But it was not enough to overcome Victoria's money and Whitmore's skill. The hearing adjourned for the day. Tomorrow would be final testimonies and the judge's decision. They returned to the hotel in silence. Rose was staying with Martha Collins tonight, away from the tension. It was just Garrett and Clara alone in a room that suddenly felt too small. "We are losing," Clara said. "I can feel it. We have not lost yet, but we are going to." She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "I am going to lose Rose, and it is my fault for leaving Boston, for thinking I could escape my mother." Garrett pulled her close. "Listen to me. Whatever happens tomorrow, we do not give up. If the judge rules against us, we appeal. We fight. We keep fighting until there is nothing left to fight with. And then what? Then we trust that justice will prevail." But even as he said it, Garrett was not sure he believed it. They held each other as darkness fell over Cheyenne. Two people against the world, hoping it would be enough. Outside their window, in a room across the street, Victoria Hartford sat with Chester Whitmore, reviewing their strategy. "The judge is sympathetic but not convinced," Whitmore said. "Tomorrow, if Garrett Kane testifies well, we could lose this. Then we do not let him testify well." Victoria's voice was cold. "I have men watching the hotel. If necessary, we can create a situation that forces his true nature to show." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where a violent man does what violent men do." Victoria smiled. "And if the child happens to disappear in the confusion, well, she will be found, eventually. Safe with her grandmother where she belongs." Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria, that is risky. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong." Victoria's eyes were hard as diamonds. "I did not come this far to lose to my own daughter and some rancher. Rose is mine. The money is mine. And by this time tomorrow, the court will agree." She stood and walked to the window, looking across at the hotel where Garrett and Clara slept. "They think love is enough," she said softly. "They will learn. Love is ever enough." The scream woke Garrett at 3 in the morning. Not Clara's scream, not from inside the hotel. This came from outside, from the direction of Martha Collins's house, where Rose was supposed to be sleeping safe. Garrett was moving before he was fully awake, grabbing his pistol, his boots. Clara sat up in bed, eyes wide with terror. "Rose," she whispered, "stay here. Lock the door behind me." But Clara was already grabbing her shawl. "I am coming with you." There was no time to argue. They ran through the dark streets of Cheyenne, following the sound of Martha's voice calling for help. Garrett's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Not again. Not another child lost because he was not there. Martha's house came into view. The front door stood open. Martha was on the porch in her nightgown, sobbing. "They took her," she cried when she saw them. 3 men. "They came through the window. I tried to stop them, but they pushed me, and when I got up, Rose was gone." Clara made a sound like a wounded animal. Garrett caught her before she collapsed. Which direction? His voice was deadly calm. Martha pointed west, toward the edge of town. "I saw them ride out maybe 5 minutes ago." Porter appeared from down the street, already dressed, already moving. "I heard the commotion." "What happened?" "Victoria's men took Rose," Garrett said. He was already calculating. 3 men, 5-minute head start heading west. There was only one road west out of Cheyenne that made sense if you wanted to avoid attention. "We need the marshal," Porter said. No time. Garrett was heading for the livery stable. By the time we explain everything, they will be miles away. Garrett, this is kidnapping. Let the law handle it. Garrett spun around. The law is what got us here. Victoria has been manipulating the law since the beginning. I am done playing by her rules. If you go after them, you will look exactly like what Whitmore says you are. Violent. Dangerous. You will lose everything. I already lost everything once. Garrett's voice was hard. I will not do it again. Clara stepped forward. I am going with you. No, she is my daughter, which is why you need to stay here. Garrett took her shoulders. Porter is right. If we both go, we look like desperate criminals. But if you stay, if you trust me to bring Rose back, then you are the mother who believed in the law. Tears streamed down Clara's face. I cannot just wait here. Yes, you can. Garrett pulled her close, kissed her hard. Trust me, I will bring our daughter home. The word "our" hit Clara like a physical blow. She nodded against his chest. Garrett turned to Porter. Keep her safe, and when the sun comes up, you go to Judge Morrison. You tell him everything. You make him see what Victoria really is. And if he does not believe me, then it does not matter anyway, because I am not coming back without Rose. Garrett was saddling his horse when Sheriff Clayton appeared in the livery stable. Heard there was trouble, Clayton said. Victoria Hartford's men kidnapped Rose. Hell, Clayton grabbed a saddle. I am coming with you. This is not your fight. The hell it is not. Clayton swung up onto his horse. You saved my life at Shiloh. I have owed you for 20 years. Time I paid that debt. Garrett met his old friend's eyes. Then let us ride. They found the trail easily enough. 3 horses heading west at a gallop, not bothering to hide their tracks. Garrett pushed his mare hard, Clayton keeping pace beside him. The night was cold and clear, stars bright enough to see by. After an hour, they spotted a campfire in the distance. Small, poorly hidden. Amateurs, or men who thought they were safe. Garrett and Clayton dismounted a quarter-mile out, moving on foot. As they got closer, Garrett could hear voices. How much is the old lady paying us for this, one man asked. 500 each, another answered. Easy money. Just keep the kid quiet until morning, then take her to the rendezvous point. What if someone comes after us? Who is going to come? The father is some rancher. He does not know where we went. Garrett smiled in the darkness. Wrong. There were 3 of them, just like Martha said. One stood watch while the other 2 sat by the fire. Rose was tied to a tree, gagged, her eyes huge with fear in the firelight. Garrett felt the rage building, the same cold fury that had come over him when he killed the 3 men at his ranch. The darkness that lived inside him, always waiting. But this time was different. This time he controlled it. Yazd it, he gestured to Clayton. Take the one on watch. I will get the other 2. Clayton nodded. On your signal. Garrett circled around, moving silent as a ghost. Years of war had taught him how to move without sound, how to kill without hesitation. The man on watch never saw Clayton coming. One sharp blow to the head, and he went down without a sound. The 2 by the fire looked up just as Garrett stepped into the firelight, pistol drawn. Evening, gentlemen. One of them went for his gun. Garrett shot him in the shoulder, not to kill, but to disable. The man screamed and went down. The second man raised his hands. Do not shoot. Garrett could have. Wanted to. Every instinct screamed at him to put a bullet through the man's skull. But Rose was watching. His daughter was watching. On your knees, he said instead. Hands behind your head. The man obeyed, and Clayton moved in to tie him up. Garrett went to Rose, untying her bonds, removing the gag. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Papa Garrett, I was so scared. I know, sweetheart. I know. He held her tight. But you are safe now. I have got you. He carried Rose to his horse while Clayton secured the 3 men. The one Garrett had shot was moaning, clutching his shoulder. What do we do with them? Clayton asked. Take them back to Cheyenne. Let them tell Judge Morrison exactly who hired them. The ride back took longer with prisoners in tow, but by the time the sun rose, they were entering Cheyenne. Word had already spread about the kidnapping. A crowd had gathered at the courthouse, and Judge Morrison himself stood on the steps waiting. Clara broke through the crowd and ran to them. Rose. Oh God, Rose. Garrett handed their daughter down to her mother. They are both safe now. Judge Morrison descended the steps, his face grave. Mr. Kane, I understand there was an incident last night. These 3 men kidnapped my daughter from Martha Collins' house at Victoria Hartford's orders. That is a serious accusation. Do you have a proof? Ask them yourself. Garrett gestured to the prisoners. They were paid $500 each to take Rose and deliver her to a rendezvous point. The judge looked at the men. Is this true? The wounded man, pale from blood loss, nodded. She hired us. Victoria Hartford said she would make it worth our while if we got the kid before the hearing. Judge Morrison's face darkened. Where is Mrs. Hartford? Right here, Your Honor. The crowd parted. Victoria stood there in her black silk, Chester Whitmore beside her. She looked every inch the dignified matriarch, but Garrett could see the calculation in her eyes. This is preposterous, she said. These men are clearly lying to save themselves. They knew where to find Rose. Garrett said, they knew exactly when and where to take her. How would they know that unless someone told them? Judge Morrison held up his hand. We will sort this out inside. Everyone into the courtroom. Now, the courtroom filled quickly, people jamming into every available space. This was no longer just a custody hearing. This was something bigger. Judge Morrison took his seat. Mr. Whitmore, call your next witness. Chester Whitmore stood, but for the first time he looked uncertain. Your Honor, in light of these allegations, I request a continuance to properly investigate. Denied. The judge's voice was sharp. You wanted this hearing expedited. Now we will finish it. Call your witness. Whitmore hesitated, then said, the petitioner rests, Your Honor. Very well, Mr. Hawthorne, do you have any witnesses? Porter stood. I call Garrett Kane. Garrett took the stand, acutely aware of every eye on him. The judge, the crowd, Clara holding Rose, Victoria watching him with cold hatred. Mr. Kane, Porter began. Tell the court about last night. Garrett did. Every detail, the scream, the chase, finding Rose tied to a tree, bringing the kidnappers back. When he finished, Porter asked, why did you not kill them? Excuse me? You are a trained soldier. You have killed before. These men had kidnapped your daughter. Why let them live? Garrett looked at Rose. Because my daughter was watching, and I wanted her to see that there is another way, that justice is better than revenge, even when you wanted revenge, especially then. Porter nodded, no further questions. Whitmore stood for cross-examination. He looked like a man grasping at straws. Mr. Kane, you claim my client hired these men, but you have no proof, only the word of criminals. And their word and the $500 each they were promised. Check Victoria Hartford's accounts. I guarantee you will find withdrawals that match. Judge Morrison looked at Victoria. Mrs. Hartford, I am going to need access to your financial records. This is outrageous, Victoria said. You cannot possibly believe these lies. I believe evidence. And right now, the evidence suggests something very wrong has occurred. Porter stood again. Your Honor, I have one more witness, someone who just arrived this morning, someone who can speak to Mrs. Hartford's character and methods. With the door at the back of the courtroom open, an older man entered, Chinese, impeccably dressed, moving with quiet dignity. Garrett had never seen him before. I called Timothy Chen to the stand. Victoria's face went white. Timothy Chen took the oath and sat down. Porter approached him carefully. Mr. Chen, please state your occupation. I was head butler for the Hartford household in Boston for 15 years. I was dismissed 6 months ago. Why? Because I witnessed it as something Mrs. Hartford did not want witnessed. The courtroom went completely silent. What did you see? I saw Mrs. Hartford push her son-in-law, Daniel Wright, down a flight of stairs. It was not an accident. It was murder. The courtroom exploded. Judge Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly. Order. Order in this court. Victoria stood, her composure finally cracking. This is a lie. This man was fired for theft. He has no credibility. Then why did you offer me $5,000 to leave the country and never speak of what I saw? Timothy's voice was calm. Why did you threaten to have me deported if I talked? I did no such thing. I have the letters, Your Honor. Porter leaned toward Garrett during a recess. There is something you should know. Chester Whitmore contacted me 3 days ago. He provided documents, financial records, evidence Victoria tried to destroy. Why would he do that? Garrett asked. Porter's voice was quiet. Guilt, maybe. Or perhaps he finally saw what she really was. He died 2 days ago. Apparent heart attack in his hotel room. But the documents he gave us, they corroborated everything Timothy said. Garrett looked across the courtroom at Victoria. She showed no emotion. But he knew. Chester had been her final loose end. Timothy produced a packet from his coat. Every threat, every bribe, and all in Mrs. Hartford's handwriting. Porter took the letters and handed them to Judge Morrison. The judge read them, his face growing darker with each page. "Mrs. Hartford," he said quietly, "these letters appear to be genuine. They could be forged," Whitmore said desperately. "Then we will verify the handwriting." Judge Morrison set the letters aside. "Mr. Chen, you witnessed Daniel Wright's death. Was the child present?" "Yes, Your Honor. Rose was in her father's arms when he fell. He turned his body to protect her. That is the only reason she survived." Clara was crying now, clutching Rose. The little girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "And what did Mrs. Hartford do after her son-in-law fell?" Timothy's voice never wavered. "She walked down the stairs, checked his pulse, confirmed he was dead. Then she looked at Rose and put her finger to her lips. Like this." He demonstrated, telling the child to be silent, to never speak of what she saw. "That is why Rose stopped talking," Clara said. She was terrified into silence. Judge Morrison looked at Victoria. "Do you have anything to say?" "Mrs. Hartford," Victoria stood very still. When she spoke, her voice was different, harder, colder. "Daniel Wright was stealing from my family. He married my daughter for money, then tried to take everything. I stopped him. That is all I did. By pushing him down the stairs, he was going to run. Take Rose. Take the trust fund. I had no choice. You always have a choice," the judge said. "You chose murder." Victoria's mask finally shattered completely. "Everything I did for love, for my family, to protect what was mine." She pointed at Clara. "You think you know love? You ran away with a man I told you was wrong for you. You chose poverty over family. You forced me to watch you throw your life away. So you took that choice away from her," Porter said. "You killed her husband. You tried to take her daughter. All in the name of love. Love is protection, control, making sure nothing bad happens." Victoria's voice rose. "Harrison loved like you all do, open, trusting, generous. And what did it get him? Betrayed, used. He died giving money to people who did not deserve it. I swore Rose would never suffer like that. I would control everything to keep her safe, by traumatizing her, by making her watch her father die." Judge Morrison's voice was disgusted. "That is not love. Mrs. Hartford, that is something sick." Rose spoke then, but clear. "Grandma scared me. She told me if I talked, Mama would die too. So I stopped talking." The courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Morrison stood. "Victoria Hartford, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Wright and conspiracy to kidnap. Bailiff, take her into custody." As the guards moved forward, Victoria looked at Clara one last time. "I loved you," she whispered. "I just did not know how to show it without controlling it. Love without trust is not love." "Mother," Clara's voice broke. "It is prison." Victoria was led away and the courtroom slowly began to breathe again. Judge Morrison turned to Garrett and Clara. "I have heard enough. Custody of Rose Wright is granted to Clara Kane and Garrett Kane, joint guardians. The trust fund will be transferred to Clara's management with court oversight until Rose reaches majority." He banged his gavel. "This case is closed. And Mrs. Hartford, you will face trial for murder." Clara collapsed against Garrett, sobbing with relief. Rose clung to both of them. "We won." The little girl whispered. "We get to stay together." "Forever," Garrett said. "I promise." 1 year later, the Wyoming plains looked exactly the same. Golden grass stretching to the horizon. Sky so blue it hurt. Heat that shimmered and danced. But everything else was different. Garrett rode the same fence line where he had first heard Clara scream, but now he was not alone. Clara rode beside him, 8 months pregnant, still insisting she could manage a horse just fine, thank you very much. Rose sat in front of Garrett, chattering about the new calf born that morning, and could they please name it Buttercup because it was yellow and she loved buttercups. The ranch had grown in the past year. A new barn, an expanded house, proper bedrooms now, and a nursery waiting for the baby that would arrive any day. They had used some of the trust fund money to hire help. 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse and treated Garrett with respect and Rose like a little princess. Clara had also used the money to establish a school in Bitter Creek for children whose families could not afford tutors or boarding schools. Rose attended 3 days a week, already reading at a level far beyond her years. Victoria Harford was serving 10 years in the territorial prison for involuntary manslaughter. The murder charge had been reduced, but the sentence was still severe. She had written to Clara twice. Both letters remained unopened. Maybe someday, Clara said when Garrett asked if she would read them. But not yet. I am not ready to forgive her. And maybe she never would be. Garrett understood that. Some wounds cut too deep. They stopped at the top of the rise where Garrett had first seen Clara and Rose. He dismounted, helped his very pregnant wife down, and lifted Rose onto his shoulders. "This is where it started," he said. "Where what?" started, Rose asked. "Us, our family." Clara smiled. "I was so scared that day, terrified you would be like the others, that you would hurt us. And now I cannot imagine life without you." Garrett pulled her close, careful of her belly. "Best decision I ever made was helping you that day. Best decision I ever made was trusting you." Rose kicked her feet impatiently. "Can we go home now? Mama needs to rest." "Listen to our daughter," Clara laughed. "She is turning into quite the mother hen." "I learned from the best," Rose said primly. They rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent. The house came into view, white paint, gleaming smoke rising from the chimney where their housekeeper was preparing supper. Garrett had spent 8 years believing he was better off alone, that caring for nothing meant nothing could hurt him, that the emptiness inside was a choice. He had been wrong about all of it. Love was risk. Family was vulnerability. Opening your heart meant accepting you could lose everything again. But it also meant late-night conversations and small hands in yours, and a woman who looked at you like you were worth saving. It meant Rose's laughter and Clara's smile and a baby on the way who would never know the loneliness that had defined Garrett's life for so long. As they rode into the yard, Rose started singing, some nonsense song she had made up about her kitten and the barn cats in a magical kingdom where animals could talk. Clara joined in her voice, blending with their daughters. And Garrett, who had not sung since Anne died, found himself humming along. The mail had arrived while they were out, a letter from Porter with news that Chester Whitmore had been disbarred for his role in Victoria's schemes. Another letter from Timothy Chen, who had been granted citizenship and now ran a restaurant in San Francisco. And one letter that made Clara stop breathing. It was from Victoria, but this one was different. "My dearest Clara," it began, "I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I wanted you to know that sitting here in prison with nothing but time to think, I have finally understood what you tried to tell me. Love without trust is prison. I built one for you, for Rose, for myself. And in trying to protect everyone, I destroyed everything. I am glad you found Garrett. I am glad Rose has a real father. I am glad you chose love over fear. I may never see you or my granddaughter again. That is my punishment, and it is just. But please know that despite everything I did wrong, the love I felt was real. I just never learned how to express it without trying to control it. I hope someday you can forgive me. But more than that, I hope you are happy. Your mother." Clara folded the letter carefully. Garrett watched her face. "Are you all right?" "I think so." She looked at him. "I think I might be ready to forgive her. Someday. Not now, but someday. That is all anyone can ask." That night, Clara went into labor. It was faster than anyone expected. Garrett barely had time to send for Doc Miller before the baby was coming. In the end, it was just the two of them in their bedroom. Garrett holding Clara's hand, telling her she could do this. She was strong, she was brave. And Clara sweating and crying and fierce, bringing their son into the world. "Daniel Harrison Kane," she said when the baby was cleaned and placed in her arms. "For my first husband and my father." The good men. Garrett looked down at his son, at his wife, at the family he never thought he would have again. "Perfect," he whispered. Rose came in to meet her baby brother, her eyes huge with wonder. "He is so small," she breathed. "You were small once too. Will he be my real brother? Even though we have different fathers." Garrett knelt beside her. "Blood does not make family. Love does. And I love you just as much as I will love him. You are both my children." Rose threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Papa. I love you too, sweetheart." 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Garrett found himself back at Anne and Abigail's graves. He had not been here since the day Clara found him. But today felt right. He knelt in the grass, now neatly tended. Clara had planted flowers here, wild roses that bloomed in summer. "Anne," he said softly, "I came to tell you something. I am happy again. I did not think I could be, but I am." He touched the cross. "I will always love you, you and Abby. Nothing will ever change that. But I found something else too. Not a replacement, but something new. Clara and Rose and Daniel, they do not take your place. They just taught me that my heart was bigger than I thought, that there was room for all of you." The wind rustled through the cottonwood tree overhead. "I hope you would be happy for me. I hope you would like Clara. I think you would. She is stubborn and brave, and she does not let me get away with anything." He smiled. "Kind of like you. Abby, you would love having a little sister and brother. Rose is smart like you were, always asking questions. Daniel is still too small to do much except eat and sleep, but I think he is going to be a handful." Garrett stood brushing dirt from his knees. "I will always come back here. I will always remember. But I am not living in the past anymore. I am living in now. And for the first time in 8 years, that feels like enough." He walked back to his horse where Clara waited with the children. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah." Garrett lifted her onto the saddle, then handed up baby Daniel. "I am good." Rose reached for him and he swung her up in front of Clara. They rode home together, a family built from broken pieces and second chances, and the stubborn belief that healing was possible. The house waited for them white and solid against the endless Wyoming sky. Smoke rose from the chimney. The barn cats sunned themselves on the porch. The new calf Buttercup grazed in the pasture. Everything Garrett had built alone was still there. But now it was filled with life and laughter and love. The mail-order bride who never married the man she came for. The rancher who thought his heart was dead. The child who needed a family. The baby who represented hope and future. They had found each other in the worst circumstances, and from that tragedy, they had built something beautiful. As Garrett helped Clara down from the horse as he held his infant son, as he listened to Rose chatter about what story she wanted him to read tonight, he felt something he had not felt in 8 years. Peace, not the absence of pain. He would always carry the scars of losing Anne and Abigail, but peace that came from acceptance, from moving forward, from choosing to love again despite the risk. Clara looked at him across the yard. Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything they had survived, everything they had built, everything they had become together passed between them, without words. She smiled. He smiled back. And somewhere in the Wyoming wind, Garrett could almost hear Anne's voice. "Be happy," it seemed to say. "Live well, love them." "We will," Garrett thought. "I promise." The sun set over the plains, painting the sky in colors that had no names. Inside the house, lamps were lit. Supper was prepared. A family gathered around the table. And Garrett Kane, who had spent 8 years in darkness, finally stepped fully into the light.